At 60,000 feet of lethal altitude, my radar locked onto the target, but what I saw with my naked eye was no metal aircraft. Hovering 100 meters in front of my F-22 cockpit was a semi-transparent, living entity, nearly 100 meters long, flickering with an eerie blue luminescence. The aircraft's systems went haywire with error warnings. A foul stench from the deep sea somehow pierced my nuclear biological chemical mask, slamming straight into my skull. It didn't open fire. Instead, in an instant, it forcibly implanted a terrifying deep ocean vision into my brain. As a former U.S. weapons system officer, before I die, I must expose this top-secret dossier that the Pentagon has been desperately suppressing. March 16, 2009, Elmendorf Richardson joined base, Alaska. For F-22A Raptors from the 90th Fighter Squadron were on a combat patrol under the codename Arctic Guardian. I was the weapons system officer in the lead aircraft that night. At 21:30, the long-range early warning radar in the Northern Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ, detected an intermittent signal. Its radar cross-section roughly matched that of AB-2, but it was at an altitude above 60,000 feet and in a stationary hover. Canada's North Warning System, NWS, also picked up the same signal. The command center classified the threat level as unknown, then upgraded it to potentially hostile. We were given rules of engagement, ROE, for visual identification and interception. Twin engines and afterburner, vertical climb. The Raptor pierced the night sky like a needle. The altimeter digits jumped erratically. I recall the climb rate between 20,000 and 30,000 feet was nearly 17% faster than usual, and we were barely using maximum thrust. Mikowski said over the intercom, "Nerd, the air feels wrong tonight. It's sucking us upward." I checked the air data sensors. No fault codes. The sensors were fine. The problem was the atmosphere itself. 40,000 feet. 50,000 feet. 55,000 feet. We leveled off at 60,000 feet, entering the patrol airspace. At that altitude, the sky looked like solidified ink. The stars above stopped twinkling. They just stared down at you, dead-eyed, sending a chill down your neck. The AWACS, look out, data link showed the target still at 011 degrees true north, 42 nautical miles away, at 63,000 feet, stationary. No drift, no circling, completely still. Nothing in nature stays perfectly still at that altitude. Mikowski lowered his voice. "Come on, let's see who the hell you really are." We accelerated to supersonic cruise. Mach 1. 6. The plane cut through the air like a hot knife through butter. At this altitude, the air was thin, pushing our engines to the edge of their performance envelope, but the Raptor behaved like a beast unleashed from its chain. At 30 nautical miles from the target, I activated the onboard and /APG-77 active electronically scanned array radar, pulse Doppler mode, full power. The radar return appeared on the multifunction display. I stared at that image for a full 5 seconds, then asked, "Look out," to confirm the data. They paused for 3 seconds. In data link communications, that silence screams. "Red Eye 1, look out. Confirm your radar is functioning properly?" "Repeat, confirm your radar is functioning properly?" I replied. "Radar self-test all green, look out. Target confirmed, bearing 011, range 30 nautical miles, altitude 63,000 feet. But the target's radar cross-section is morphing." I coined the word, morphing, out of desperation. No technical term could describe what I was seeing. The target's radar return wasn't formed by sharp reflection angles from metal skin. It was like a patch of writhing mercury, with blurred, greasy edges. The radar cross-section jumped between 0.03 and 8 square meters in a completely random pattern. This wasn't a stealth aircraft. This was something that both absorbed and reflected radar waves in a dual manner. Strangest of all, I thought I saw bifurcations at the edges of the return. Like branches. Like tentacles. Mikowski leaned forward, his helmet scraping the inside of the canopy. "Visual identification," he said. "We need to get close enough." We closed the distance to 15 nautical miles. The N/AQ-37 electro-optical distributed aperture system, the 6 infrared sensors embedded across the Raptor's body, began outputting the first synthetic image. That image was projected onto my helmet-mounted display. That night, the Federal Aviation Administration had a meteorological observation balloon west of the base, and the orbital satellite thermal imaging data was later seized by the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, a FOSI, reclassified as an instrument calibration error. But I saw the raw image. In the thermal scan, it looked like a dissected, living heart, spewing a thermal plume slightly hotter than the background into the 60,000-foot sky around it. The instruments weren't off. It had a temperature, 15 nautical miles. A green diamond box popped up on my helmet-mounted display. The Raptor's sensor system had autonomously locked onto the target. I stared at that diamond, and a bizarre illusion crept into my mind. It wasn't us locking onto it, it was letting us lock on. 10 nautical miles. No tactical alerts in the cockpit. No radar lock warning, no missile incoming warning. The airspace around us was as clean as an operating room. But my skin started to prickle. That numbness climbed from my fingertips, up past my wrists, crawling over my forearms, like 1,000 icy needles stabbing into your pores all at once. It wasn't a hallucination. Mikowski felt it too. He told me later, back on the ground, that his calf muscles started twitching uncontrollably. 8 nautical miles. The electro-optical sensors suddenly switched to a visible light image clear enough to process. The Raptor's onboard computer sharpened it with AI enhancement algorithms and pushed it to my multifunction display. I stared for 3 seconds. Then my hand went to the ejection handle. Not a conscious decision, pure, raw reflex. That cold metal grip was the only anchor I had left, the only proof I was still lucid. The target wasn't an aircraft. It was a living organism. It was a translucent, pale blue bioluminescent colossal organism, its overall form resembling a coelenterate, a jellyfish, or a siphonophore, but on an absurd scale. The main body was umbrella-shaped, with an initial diameter estimate of 60 to 80 meters, bigger than any fixed-wing aircraft I had ever seen. Under the bell hung countless whip-like tentacles, each several to a dozen meters long, writhing slowly in the thin stratospheric air. Its surface had no metallic reflection, no rivets, no welds, no intakes, no engine nozzles, nothing. Just a layer of something like ghostly skin, and inside, a luminous blue network of countless fibrous conduits, where some fluid flowed at an agonizingly slow pace. Not blood, at least not Earth's blood. It pulsed with a faint blue aura at intervals, each pulse pushing back the surrounding ice crystal clouds, forming a perfect spherical void, as if that aura had some kind of repulsive force. Like a living, drifting giant jellyfish at the edge of space. Mikowski's breathing over the intercom grew heavy and ragged. I knew what he was about to say, but I wished he wouldn't. Some things, once spoken, can never be taken back. Nerd. His voice scraped like sandpaper over glass. It's turning to look at us. It was turning. That behemoth made no aerodynamically sound maneuver. No banking, no yawing, none of the movements a conventional aircraft would make. One side of its bell simply contracted, like muscle, and in less than 3 seconds, the entire form completed an axial rotation, its front aimed at us. It had no eyes. But some structure under the bell coalesced into a crescent of dark, photosensitive tissue, darker and deeper than the surrounding tissue, like a freshly opened abyss. That blackness aimed straight at my cockpit. I still remember the smell in the cockpit. The Raptor's environmental control system always had that metallic tang of ozone and jet fuel, a smell I knew so well I could ignore it. But in that moment, a sweet, rank odor suddenly flooded in. Like rust. Like rotting seaweed. Like some nameless seafood gutted open. It ignored the sealed environmental control system, seeping in through the edges of my oxygen mask, straight into my skull. My saliva started flooding. Not from hunger. It was the prelude to vomiting. Impossible. The F-22 has a fully sealed, positive pressure cockpit with NBC filtration. No molecule from the outside air should penetrate the cabin. It wasn't airborne. It was seeping in through some other route. At the same moment, I heard a sound. No, it wasn't a sound I heard. My body perceived it instead. An extremely low frequency, undulating vibration, likely in the infrasonic range of just a few hertz, resonating perfectly with human organs. It bypassed the ears entirely, attacking the viscera directly. My diaphragm quivered. My eyeballs vibrated at a terrifyingly high frequency, blurring my vision. An indescribable pressure seized my chest, as if an invisible hand were squeezing my lungs from the inside. Macaulay was in worse shape. His head lolled forward, and the Raptor's flight path began deviating slightly from level flight. "Hammer!" I shouted over the intercom. No response. Switching to rear seat priority, I seized the flight stick, thumb flicking the trim switch to stabilize the aircraft. "Hammer! Wake up! Your O2 saturation's dropping!" I barked through the ICS. Macaulay's physiological data streamed across my display. His heart rate had spiked from under 100 to 140 BPM, then plummeted to 50. This wasn't panic. This was someone forcibly depressing his vagus nerve. I had to make a choice. Rules of engagement authorized weapons release and self-defense. My thumb found the missile button on the stick. The AIM-120D AMRAAMs were active, seekers warming up. 2 AIM-9X Sidewinders on the right pylon also cycled to ready. The Raptor's weapons bay doors would take under a second to open at 60,000 feet. But my index finger froze. Not from fear. Because its tendrils began arranging themselves with precise, organized intent. This wasn't a defensive posture. This was a system booting up. Its bioluminescence pulsed brighter with each cycle, shifting from pale blue to cyan before deepening into near ultraviolet purple. The tendril tips performed intricate maneuvers, each altering length, orientation, and spacing. Within 40 seconds, the jellyfish-like organism had reconfigured itself into a 100-meter wide, morphing phased array in the thin upper atmosphere. It emitted a radio signal into the night sky. Or more accurately, it became the transmitter. The N/ALR-94 electronic warfare suite captured it first. The Raptor systems automatically logged the signal in tactical memory, attempting classification and identification. Database results, NO match. Signal type, suspected VHF pulse with FM modulation, but carrier structure and modulation pattern completely unknown. Signal analysis could wait. A more terrifying realization struck. Its transmission was directional. Those pulses focused into an impossibly narrow beam aimed straight up. It wasn't talking to us. It was hailing something above. How long had it been calling? Years? Centuries? Was it attempting contact, or issuing a warning? Or was it merely a sentry, while something else, something behind it, moved toward us through the dark? The moment this thought crystallized, my eardrums exploded with pain. The vibrations morphed into a subsonic roar, something tectonic, penetrating the airframe, my bones, my very consciousness before detonating inside my skull. Every display in the cockpit flickered. The MFD flashed an error code I'd never seen, anomalous external radiation detected. This code didn't exist in FAA technical manuals. Lockheed Martin's engineers only programmed for the known world. They hadn't written a single line for this. Yet the Raptor, mankind's engineering pinnacle, had generated the alert itself. It acknowledged the presence of something before we did. I maxed out the environmental control system, trying to purge the rotting seaweed stench. Useless. It wasn't in the air. It lived deeper, in the amygdala's primal fear circuits. As long as the concept of smell existed, it would fester there. Macaulay woke up. He didn't make a sound, but his hand suddenly clutched the handle on the edge of the canopy with the strength of a drowning man grasping his last piece of driftwood. His heart rate was surging back from the depths, skyrocketing to 160 in a heartbeat. He gasped heavily, his mask fogging up completely. It spoke to me. His voice was completely hoarse. "What did you say?" It wasn't words. It was images. He swallowed hard. I saw the ocean floor. Deep, so deep. No light. But there were things there. Thousands, maybe millions. Covering the entire seabed. They were glowing. They were waiting. Every hair on my body stood on end. If any pilot had told me this during training, I would have suggested they be grounded immediately and undergo a psychiatric evaluation. But right here, right now, in the stratosphere at 60,000 feet, facing a massive organic entity 100 meters away, firing a directed beam upward, I knew he was telling the truth. Because I felt it too. The thing was sharing some kind of information. It didn't want to kill us. It was just passing by. Like you wouldn't notice an ant under your foot while walking. Then, the first encounter began. Don't misunderstand. It wasn't a firefight. A firefight is mutual. What happened next was one-sided. The target started moving toward us. It didn't follow any classical laws of motion. Its edges moved in a wave-like contraction, but it wasn't propulsion. It was more like space itself was folding around it. It was closing in, but there was no acceleration. 1 second it was a nautical mile away, the next, its tentacles were almost brushing the tip of our left wing. The APG-77 radar's range readings were going haywire. The data processing unit couldn't keep up with the target's position refresh rate. From a nautical mile to less than 100 meters, there was no discernible distance transition. The target's radar signature wasn't a continuous line. It was a series of broken points and leaps. The Raptor's onboard computer flagged the unreasonable data as a sensor malfunction within 10 milliseconds. I was more lucid than the computer. I saw it with my own eyes right there to my left. At that distance, I could see the texture of its surface through the canopy glass. It wasn't the smooth hull of an alien spacecraft. It was skin, or something like skin. Its semi-transparent outer layer was laced with a network of fibers, each containing a slow, pulsating bioluminescent liquid. The tentacles were covered in thousands of tiny nodules, each like a small eye, yet not quite an eye, more like sensory organs. They were perceiving us, this metal and composite structure, and perhaps even the two frantic, flesh and blood hearts inside. McCausland clenched his teeth and shoved the control stick to the right. The Raptor executed a defensive hard turn at over 700 knots. The sensors showed we were pulling 7 GS, and my helmet visor was pressed hard to the left. The thing didn't pursue us. It hung there, its tentacles spreading out, like a translucent flower blooming at 60,000 feet. It didn't seem to care. Red Eye 1, we've lost your clarity. Please report status. Over. The AWACS was still there. In what felt like an instant, they had been calling for about 40 seconds. I couldn't remember exactly how long. Time had lost its linear quality. Overlook, Red Eye 1. Target at 2 o'clock left, extremely close. No fire from this aircraft. Request further instructions. Over. A crackle of static on the comm channel. Then the Overlook operator, a woman named Linda, a captain whose voice I had heard hundreds of times, never trembling, responded in a slightly quivering tone. Red Eye 1, Command Center orders you to immediately disengage. Repeat, immediately disengage. Retreat to 100 nautical miles and await clearance from the follow-up formation. Over. Follow-up formation. They wanted to send more people up here. As I prepared to comply with the order, the second event occurred. The colossal entity's interior suddenly split. The edges of its canopy unfolded like petals, and 3 spherical entities, each about 10 meters in diameter, detached from the main body. These 3 entities scattered in different directions with the same irregular, leaping movement. They didn't attack us. They moved until they were 10 nautical miles away, then simultaneously suspended in midair, emitting light pulses at a frequency entirely different from the mother entity. The shape of the entity was contracting. It reduced its diameter from nearly 100 meters to less than half its size, like a fist clenching tight. It was leaving, or it was making room for something else. Watchtower, the target is splitting. 3 smaller entities have detached. The main body is in some kind of contraction state. I need to vacate this airspace immediately. At that moment, the third smaller entity suddenly began moving toward us. It was faster than the main body, and its movement was more aggressive. In a fraction of a second, it covered half the distance, then halted, stopping at a distance of about 5,000 feet, neither too close nor too far. It began generating an extremely powerful electromagnetic field. For the first time, the Raptor's avionics system showed significant anomalies. The data on the HUD began to flicker, the inertial navigation system drifted, and the GPS signal was temporarily lost. But the most unsettling thing was that the small spherical entity, at the peak of the electromagnetic field, turned into a perfect mirror. Its surface, in an instant, could reflect everything: starlight, cockpit lighting, and even my own face. I saw myself on the surface of the sphere. It wasn't just a visual reflection. That face wasn't mine. It was the face I had when I was 7 years old, playing with paper airplanes in the backyard of my home in California. It was a memory, a scene that shouldn't have been there, extracted from my mind and placed on a mirror 6 miles above the Earth. Then the sphere vanished. All the entities disappeared from the radar simultaneously. They didn't fly away at high speed, they didn't go invisible, they didn't dive into the clouds. They simply ceased to exist. The radar screen was blank. The infrared sensors were blank. The electro-optical sensors were blank. That smell disappeared in the same second. The low-frequency vibration ceased. The tingling on my skin vanished. Everything returned to normal in that instant. The F-22's avionics system completed its self-check. All systems reported normal. The fault codes were gone, as if nothing had ever happened, as if the system itself was erasing evidence. I turned my head in through the canopy, saw a faint, dark purple aurora on the eastern horizon, its shape unnaturally vertical, like a crack. The aurora lasted about 3 minutes before it disappeared. Watchtower, Red-Eye 1. The target has vanished. Repeat, the target has vanished. My systems are back to normal. I will disengage and return to base. Over. After a moment of silence, Linda's voice came back. Copy, Red-Eye 1. Radar confirms the target has vanished. You are cleared to return. Follow-on formation has been cancelled. That was the chilling part. The follow-on formation was cancelled. The reason was, target vanished. Didn't they want to check what just happened? Didn't they want to send a reconnaissance aircraft or a high-altitude drone to rescan the area? Didn't they want to recover any remnants? No. They didn't want more eyes to see that thing. They didn't want more data recorders to log those fault codes. They wanted this to end right here. Later, I found out that the AWACS mission logs were fully extracted and replaced with a carefully crafted alternative report within 2 hours of my landing. The alternative report described the target as an unidentified high-altitude balloon, concluding it was likely a foreign surveillance balloon. And our onboard mission data, those gigabytes of sensor recordings, were removed by 2 Pentagon majors who personally arrived on the scene, their hands still warm from the mission, to replace the data storage units with new ones. There was even a step where I didn't sign any classified confidentiality letters. They skipped that step entirely. They just placed a light green piece of official paper in front of me, with a single line. Per Department of Defense Directive 5205-07, the following matters are classified top secret. Any form of disclosure will constitute treason. Then a man in civilian clothes stated, "You saw a weather balloon up there tonight. Do you understand?" I nodded. You think the story ends here? No. That was just the first round of conflict. It was like a cat pawing its prey before the final kill. The real fear began when I returned to the ground. We landed at 0242. The runway at Elmendorf was shrouded in a thin mist, the approach lights diffusing into a soft, yellow glow. The Raptor's landing gear hit the ground with a dull thud, the deceleration chute deployed, and the speed dropped from 140 knots to taxiing speed. Everything was normal. The ground crew waited at the apron, attaching the tow bar and closing the hangar doors. I climbed out after the canopy opened, standing on the icy wing, drawing a deep breath of the minus 30-degree air of Alaskan midnight. My lungs stung, but my senses gradually sharpened. The mechanic came up to conduct the post-flight inspection, and I recited the technical checklist as usual before heading toward the squadron building. The corridor was filled with the low hum of fluorescent lights. I pushed open the door to the locker room and placed my flight helmet on the bench. Then I saw the mirror. On the side of my face, there was a patch of light red marks. It wasn't a scrape, nor the indentation from the pressure mask. Instead, it resembled a network of ruptured capillaries, stretching from behind my ear to my jawline, arranged with an eerie regularity, as if something had been pressed against it and then removed. I touched it with my hand. It didn't hurt, but there was a rough, granular texture beneath the skin. I leaned closer to the mirror, pressing the pad of my finger gently against the marks. The capillaries refilled with blood in a way they shouldn't. They didn't merely return to color passively but followed a sequence, starting from the topmost one, then cascading down like dominoes, re-illuminating. Capillaries don't queue up on their own. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was just the result of hygiene maneuvers causing subcutaneous blood vessel rupture. Don't overthink it. A splash of water would do the trick. I walked into the shower, turned on the hot water. The moment the water hit my face, I caught a whiff of seawater. Not the fresh, briny scent of the beach, but the putrid, decayed odor of deep-sea sediment, mingled with the burnt protein smell of some organic fluid. Bubbles were forming in the shower drain. The water pooled on the floor, seeping over my shoe soles. I looked down, and in the dim light, I saw a thin, almost oily sheen on the surface of the water, tinged with a purplish hue. I reached to turn off the faucet, but my hand passed through the water, brushing against something soft. I jerked my hand back. It was just soap scum. Just soap scum. Just scaring yourself. But when I lay down to rest, I knew it wasn't. Then came the false calm. The day after the mission, I was grounded, for a legitimate reason, medical observation and psychological evaluation following the encounter with an unknown object at high altitude. Standard procedure. McCausland was also grounded, and during his EEG scan, an abnormal low-frequency brainwave activity was detected in the occipital region, described by the doctors as sleep-like neurorhythms. In simpler terms, his brain still believed it was at 60,000 feet, conversing with that thing. As for me, my evaluation result was normal, but rest recommended. I spent 2 days in the base hospital, undergoing a series of tests. No one talked about that night. The 90th Squadron continued to fly according to the duty roster, though the patrol altitude was temporarily lowered to 40,000 feet. The deputy squadron commander casually mentioned during a briefing that recent atmospheric anomalies at high altitude have diminished. Without further explanation, this routine gave me a brief respite. I even began to convince myself that perhaps it was just a balloon, perhaps it was all just a hallucination. People concoct lies to protect their sanity, even when the liar is their own mind. On the third night, the situation reversed. At 3 a.m., I was awakened by a sound. Not a dream. Not an echo in my mind. A real, physical sound with a tangible vibration. It was faint but very clear, a rhythmic hiss, like a compressed air tube slowly releasing pressure. The frequency was about 9 times per minute. I sat up. The sound was coming from my dormitory storage cabinet. When I pulled open the cabinet door, the smell hit me first. Seawater. Rotten seaweed. Rust. Then I saw the flight suit hanging inside, the one I wore the night of the incident. Its surface was coated with a thin, pale blue, slimy residue, slowly dripping and pooling at the bottom of the cabinet. The trail of mucus formed a pattern on the chest of the flight suit, resembling brushstrokes, spreading, branching, and converging on the fabric. It wasn't dead. A part of it had landed with me that night. I didn't scream. Screaming in the barracks only brings trouble. I took a step back, wrapped my hand in a towel, and picked up the squadron-issued radio. but my finger hovered over the transmit button. What was I supposed to say? Asterisk. There's alien slime on my flight suit. Asterisk. Before sunrise, I'd be bundled into a transport and shipped straight to the psych ward at Walter Reed. They'd pump me so full of sedatives I'd spend the rest of my days drooling and grinning at the ceiling. I've seen how they handle things. I've watched seasoned vets vanish for saying the right kind of wrong thing. So I made another choice. I shut the locker, sealed the seams with duct tape, and double-bolted my door. Then I sat on the edge of my bunk, staring at that locker in the dark until morning. Dawn gave me some nerve back. When I opened the locker again, the slime was gone, completely evaporated. No trace, no scent, no residue. My G-suit hung dry and smooth. The locker walls were spotless. If I hadn't seen it myself, I'd have sworn it was a nightmare. That was the problem. Asterisk evaporation. Asterisk in sub-zero temperatures, inside a sealed locker, it chose to disappear rather than be found. That residue had asterisk intent. Asterisk it knew to protect itself. It knew to hide. I stuffed the flight suit into a sealed bag and buried it in my gear. Regulations demanded all issued equipment be returned for decontamination. I broke protocol. I took emergency leave, flew back to Ohio, and had the residue tested at a private lab under a fake name. A week later, the results hit my personal inbox. The lab called from an unlisted number. Just one question, asterisk. What the hell did you send us? Asterisk. The report was technical, then terrifying. Traces of membranous cellular structures, laced with silicon-based polymers and amino acid sequences not found in Earth's biosphere. The polymers woven into the fabric formed non-random polygonal patterns, like semiconductor etching. The lab's final verdict? Asterisk. Possible unknown prokaryotic microorganism. Asterisk. Bullshit. This wasn't a microbe. It was a piece, a fragment of something larger, something that could still sense, locate, and wade through it. 6 days later, the recall came. Not from my CO, from a voice so flat it might as well have been the wilted plant next to my filing cabinet. East Coast accent. Caller ID. Asterisk Peterson AFB, Colorado. Asterisk NORAD. Red Eye 1WSO. It said, using my tactical designation, not rank or name. Return to Elmendorf within 48 hours. You've been assigned to a special working group for supplementary investigation into the March 16th incident. Understand this is not optional. Asterisk special working group. Supplementary investigation. Not optional. Asterisk each word was another nail in the coffin. On the flight back, I replayed every detail of that night. Things I'd missed surfaced. Like the creature's pulsing light, before it split into those 3 orbs, there was a rhythm. Long, short, long, long, short, short. A sequence, repeated 3 times. Not Morse, but not random. Worse, I realized McCoskey wasn't the only one who'd been asterisk-fed images. Asterisk my symptoms came later, subtler. 5 blank minutes on the flight back, logged as routine piloting, but with no memory of it. Like a computer hijacked by a background process. And in that void, my subconscious retained one thing, asterisk coordinates. Asterisk not latitude and longitude. A star chart. A point in deep space, anchored to fixed stars. One of them, the reference, was labeled asterisk origin. Asterisk I even know the catalog number of that star. In the star charts, it's a K-type main sequence star, located approximately 1,200 light-years from Earth. Within its habitable zone orbits an ocean planet about 4 times the mass of Earth. I can't explain how I know this. I never studied astronomy systematically. Yet this information appeared in my mind like an unzipped file, clear, precise, every byte meticulously intact. Was this transmitted by that entity? Or was it merely a fragment accidentally left behind as it passed Earth? Or perhaps, it used our planet as a relay station, a signal tower, a post office? And we pilots, who happened to cross its path in the skies, were deemed nothing more than viable low-grade hosts? By the time I reached Elmendorf, McCoskey was already in the briefing room. He looked a decade older. A cup of black coffee sat untouched in front of him. When he lifted his gaze to meet mine, his eyes held something I had seen once before. The same expression he had worn when he jolted awake in the cockpit that night. "They showed me the thermal satellite imagery," he said bluntly. "On the night of March 16th, NORAD's high-orbit infrared early warning satellites recorded a massive heat signature lasting 0.7 seconds over the target airspace. Not at 60,000 feet. At ionospheric altitude. That thing fired something upward. The energy output was equivalent to 20 megatons of TNT. 20 megatons. The yield of the largest thermonuclear weapon ever detonated by mankind. And yet, no explosion, no shockwave, no electromagnetic pulse. It simply shot into space like an echo, a flare. That thing had arranged itself at that altitude into a phased array, using its whip-like tendrils to fire a 20 megaton signal into the void. Then vanished. They brought us in because they want more intel," McCoskey said, rotating his cup in his hands. "The problem is, they don't know how much we already know." "What's their worst fear?" I asked. "That it wasn't a weapon at all. Not a defense system. Not a probe. Not a ship." McCoskey raised his bloodshot eyes to mine. "They're terrified it was an egg sac. A reproductive unit. And what happened that night was propagation. Those 3 spheres were its offspring. At least one of them came back to the surface, with us." My hands began to tremble. A delayed physical reaction, entirely disconnected from my cold, calculating mind. "How do you know?" I demanded. McCoskey didn't answer. Instead, he unzipped his flight suit, exposing a patch of skin just below his left pectoral. There, identical to the red web-like marks behind my ear, but worse. His were luminescent. A faint blue glow pulsed beneath his skin in the dim briefing room, like a bioluminescent tattoo, flickering in time with his heartbeat. "It's growing," McCoskey said. "Started the day after we landed. Crawled up from my calf to my ribs. Moves through my circulatory system. It doesn't consume anything. But I'm losing weight. What it needs is heat. My body's heat." I stood abruptly, my chair toppling backward. Before I could react, the briefing room door swung open. 2 men in plain clothes entered, a third lingering in the doorway, a fourth stationed at the end of the hall. They didn't introduce themselves. One glanced at McCoskey's glowing chest and stated, "Captain McCoskey, as of now, you are under Tier 1 medical isolation. All flight records are reclassified. You no longer have a name." The other turned to me. "You're symptomatic. Come with us." "And if I refuse?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He didn't respond. Instead, he produced a transparent evidence bag containing the G-suit I had sent to the private lab. So the technician was one of theirs. The moment I mailed that sample, every move I made was tracked. They knew all along. This is how they operate. You think you're conducting a secret investigation, but every step you take has been guided along a path they laid out long before you even realized you were walking it. I was taken to an unmarked building, not within the boundaries of Elmendorf Base but in some industrial park on the outskirts of Anchorage, deep underground. Don't let the word underground fool you. The equipment inside was more advanced than any military medical center. They ran a full-body MRI and CT scan, extracted cerebrospinal fluid, and drew 32 vials of blood. During this process, the red marks on my chest and back began to glow. It was a faint blue, the exact hue of the HUD text in advanced fighter jets. The irony was cruel. The green HUD of the world's most advanced fighter jets was an interface for information, while the blue light emanating from my body was a message from something that didn't belong to this world, a code I could never decipher. On the 5th day of isolation, I requested to see Macaulay. They said no. I asked why, and they finally gave me an answer. Macaulay's condition had deteriorated drastically during the night of the 4th day. The blue tissue on his chest had begun to grow inward, penetrating the intercostal muscles and the pleura. Doctors attempted to surgically remove a sample, but as soon as the scalpel cut through his skin, The glowing fibers contracted instantly, like an octopus startled, evading the blade. They moved within his body, with a predictive ability and a reactive response. It wasn't an infection. It was an independent organism, coexisting with him. Or, to be more precise, he was being possessed by it. In the early hours of the 5th day, Macaulay fell into a deep coma. His brain activity displayed an extremely abnormal waveform, identical to the extremely low-frequency signal modulation recorded at 60,000 feet that night. His brain was replaying the creature's message, like a record stuck on repeat, over and over again. I asked if there was any chance he would wake up. The lead doctor was a woman in her 30s, a colonel, but I didn't remember her name. She looked at me, silent for a long, long time, and then said, "His vital signs are stable, but his brain, he's not in there. Whatever is in there now, it's not him." On the 7th day of isolation, the marks on my body began to fade. Perhaps my immune system had kicked in, or maybe the hitchhiking entity decided to abandon this host. Or it might have simply completed its task after confirming its position, dissipating like the slime that vanishes from a closet. The day I was discharged, no one came to see me off. I walked out of the underground facility alone, and the Alaskan winter sunlight was blinding as I emerged. I stood in the snow-covered parking lot, looking up at the sky. At 60,000 feet, there was nothing. The sky was a piercing blue. But I stared at that void for a long time, because I knew there was something there. Something invisible, something that swam, floated, reproduced, and waited. Perhaps they had never left. Perhaps every time we ascended, we were passing through their world. After that, I was reassigned. Not grounded, this was probably the last act of mercy, or fear, from the military, as some generals feared that grounding me might raise more suspicion. I was transferred to Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, tasked with training the next generation of F-35 pilots. Officially, I was a tactical instructor, but in reality, I was a specimen in a glass jar. They monitored everything. My mail, my calls, my travels, even the time and brand of coffee I bought at the base supermarket. They feared I would speak, but their surveillance was destined to fail, because in those few days of infection, I had learned something. Something that their satellites, radars, and sensors would never detect. The living jellyfish was not an isolated case. The stratosphere and even the higher mesosphere above Earth have always been home to similar, yet different life stages of giant, soft-bodied entities. Most of the time, they were completely invisible, reflecting no visible light, generating no radar echoes, emitting no detectable heat. Their existence was more akin to an interstitial ecological niche between the atmosphere and near-Earth space. Like an unseen ecosystem, they floated in the thin upper layers of the atmosphere, more than 60,000 feet above us, distinct from the terrestrial biosphere yet subtly intertwined with it. The one we encountered that night over Alaska was simply in a brief, visible phase of its life cycle. It was in its breeding season. It was glowing, dividing, and shouting. Once it completed this phase, it would become transparent again, sink back into the depths of the atmosphere, or drift away at the edge of the ionosphere, carried by the solar wind. This might be the truth behind the UFO sightings that humans have witnessed throughout history. At least part of the truth. Those unexplained signals that suddenly appear and vanish on radar, the luminous phenomena repeatedly reported by pilots but never verified, the strange light spots, glimpsed by astronauts during space missions. They are not alien spacecraft. They are alien life. They are alive. But if it were merely life, that would be one thing. The real turning point came 2 months after I was released from isolation, when I stumbled upon a set of meteorological data. As a tactical instructor, I still had access to confidential satellite data streams. In a nondescript manner, I extracted global stratospheric meteorological data up to March 16, 2009, and used a polar coordinate search algorithm to compare similar atmospheric anomalies. The stratospheric ceiling abnormal elevation, mentioned in the meteorological briefing. The results were chilling. This anomaly was not isolated. It had appeared over 27 locations around the globe in the 12 months leading up to March 16th, always at night, and each lasting no more than 8 hours. These 27 locations formed a slow but coherent moving path, starting above a section of the South Pacific, near the Chromatic Trench, which plunges to depths exceeding 10,000 meters. What Mulkowski saw when he was implanted was the deep-sea seabed, covered with thousands of similar glowing entities. And the starting point of that moving path was precisely above one of the deepest ocean trenches on Earth. They emerged from the sea. These entities can freely traverse the extreme high pressure of the ocean depths and the extreme low pressure of the atmosphere. They have no air sacs, no swim bladders, no cavities that could be destroyed by pressure changes. They exist on a completely different biochemical foundation from ours, based on silicon or some other substrate we cannot comprehend. Their only weakness, perhaps, is during their breeding period when they temporarily expose themselves for no more than a few hours. Just as salmon must return to fresh water to spawn, their life cycle requires them to rise to the stratosphere, at the edge of the ionosphere, to complete some sort of gestation ritual involving cosmic rays. This is what the 20 million ton upward signal was. It wasn't a signal to an interstellar mothership. It was them spawning, reproducing, expanding. By the end of May 2009, I made a decision. It was a small decision within the boundaries of humanity, but for me, it was everything. I encapsulated the data from a commercial lab, the analysis of satellite meteorological data anomalies, and the patterns of the marks appearing in my own body, into an encrypted file. I affixed 3 different mailing labels and sent them to 3 people I didn't know. One was an atmospheric physicist at MIT. Another was a marine microbiologist at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. The third was an investigative journalist for the technology section of the New York Times. I didn't sign my real name. I don't know if the letters ever arrived. I don't know if the recipients had the courage to open them. They might have been intercepted along the way. They might still be sitting in some file cabinet marked Top Secret, alongside the Roswell, Project Blue Book, and Phoenix Lights archives, waiting out another meaningless 50 years. Or perhaps one person opened the letter, read the incomprehensible silicon-based molecular formulas, the thermal anomaly coordinates, and the deep-sea correlation data, then silently looked out the window, gazing at the seemingly harmless sky. And then he understood. He understood that while humans always look to the stars, searching for spacecraft from other star systems, the true, vast unknown might have been right above us, at the edge of the atmosphere we breathe, in the depths of the primordial ocean that gave birth to all life on this planet. They have always been here. We are just beginning to sense their presence. How many of us in the squadron are still in the know? Mulkowski still lies in a military medical facility, his ECG normal, but his EEG plays encrypted signals from another biological system. Captain Linda from the observation tower was reassigned from Alaska in July 2009 to a clerical post with no radar. The 2 majors took the data storage units from the Raptors and were never heard from again. I don't want to discuss the final 3rd wave, because it hasn't happened yet. But it is happening. Have you noticed that since 2010, pilot reports of unidentified flying objects around the world have been increasing exponentially? From the U.S. Navy's gimbal to the videos revealed at last year's congressional hearings, each one describes the same thing: transparent, arbitrarily changing altitude, and defying the laws of kinematics, spherical or complex objects that seem to actively avoid, and at times, deliberately approach. The Pentagon eventually established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, ARO. They changed the name, calling UFOs UAPs. Renaming is one of the oldest tricks in the intelligence playbook. If you can't solve a problem, you rename it and pretend it's now something manageable. But let me tell you something ARO won't. A significant portion of these things are not aircraft. They are organisms. They are alive. And according to my conservative estimates, their total number has increased by at least 400% since 2009. This is not a guess. It's a calculation. I am a weapons systems officer, and my expertise lies in analyzing sensor data streams. I statistically attributed anomalous radar reflections from both military and civilian sources worldwide over the years, excluding known aircraft, meteorological phenomena, and sensor errors. The signals categorized as unknown are growing at a superlinear rate. This growth correlates with high statistical significance to rising ocean temperatures, increased seismic activity on the ocean floor, and changes in the chemical composition of the upper atmosphere. If that day finally comes, if the unseen entities in the atmosphere decide to re-enter their visible reproductive phase on a large scale, or, more terrifyingly, if they reach a certain threshold and exhibit new behavioral patterns, then what McCausland and I experienced that night in March, at 60,000 feet above Alaska, will not remain a sealed, classified file. It will be the first genuine, first-hand account of human contact in history. And the author of this account, a former weapons systems officer slowly dying of pancreatic cancer, will tell as many people as possible before cancer takes him. Now, back to that jellyfish. It's still there. I can feel it. Not under my skin. Those marks have long since disappeared. In my dreams. Every few weeks, I dream of floating at 60,000 feet, with no aircraft, no G-suit, no canopy. I'm wearing just a regular flight suit, suspended in the thin, cold air, yet I can breathe normally. Above me, the stars fill the entire field of vision, and below, layers of clouds stack up, while distant sunlight slices the Earth's curve into a bright, blue crescent. In front of me is the behemoth. It's no longer terrifying, or perhaps I've grown accustomed to its terror. Its umbrella-like body gently pulses in the stratospheric currents, each tentacle swaying like seaweed. It looks at me. I know it's looking at me. I don't know how it sees. It has no eyes, no face, no recognizable sensory organs. But I know it senses me, just like it did outside the F-22 cockpit that night. But this time, it didn't send images. It sent a question without words, without sound. In my dream, I suddenly understand its meaning. The question is, when will you come up? Not, if you will come. The word is, when. It assumes that humanity will eventually ascend, a foregone conclusion, a given. And it waits there. They all wait there. Each time, I wake up from that dream, lying in the dark of my bedroom, my undershirt drenched in cold sweat. Outside, the quiet suburban night of Ohio, the chirping of insects, the occasional distant car, and the neighbor's dog whining softly in its sleep. Everything is normal. The sky is normal. The atmosphere is normal. Reality is normal. But I can't go back to normal. Because I know, in the final frame of that dream, the giant jellyfish's tentacles subtly point in my direction. And behind it, in the deeper stratosphere, uncharted by any human satellite, more lights are starting to appear. 1, 2, 10, 100. Those lights float weightlessly in the air, flickering, pulsing at a slow, almost eternal rhythm. They are waiting for a signal, for a moment, for an approaching, irreversible threshold. And as I write this, the alpha brainwave monitor flickers with the same low-frequency signal waveform that I recorded in the cockpit of the F-22 all those years ago. Perhaps it wasn't a dream. Perhaps it never was.